the slides.
Oh, nice. I can see it.
Oh, there
Well, thank you for having me back to talk about the Blue River Report Card. I'm Addison Banks, the Land Trust Coordinator with Heartland Conservation Alliance. And the last time I talked about the report card to the Environmental Management Commission, I was talking about what we did to gather the data and score it. And this time I'm going to talk about what the grades were, what the results are, and what we can do to improve those grades. But really quickly, I'll just say it's the report card is for the Blue River Watershed. A watershed is just all the land that drains into a particular water body or water course. I'm sure you all know that. But a report card was originally developed by the University of Maryland Center for Environmental Science in 1986 for the Chesapeake Bay. And using their tried and true 5-step process, every year they define and measure data on the health of the ecosystem, and then they score and grade that data, and they communicate the results in a report card. So the report card is a tool that the University of Maryland has used to catalyze improvements in ecosystem health. And it's also guiding restoration efforts while stimulating further research. So University of Maryland took this report card all around the world, teaching different organizations, different entities, how to make these report cards. And we brought them to the Blue River, and we had a 3-day workshop where we engaged, over a course of time, we engaged over 100 stakeholders in the process for developing and then peer reviewing this report card that we made. So the report card has 2 different categories. It's divided up into 2 different categories. One is a geographic categorization. We have the upper, the middle, and the lower watershed. So the upper is from the headwaters down to where Indian Creek confluences with the Blue River. The middle is from that confluence to where Brush Creek confluences with the Blue River. And then the lower is from that confluence to the Blue River's outlet into the Missouri River. But the other categorization is based on the eco-health categories that we devised. And so there are 6 of those categories. And within each of the 6 categories, there are 2 or 3 indicators of watershed health. But the categories are community connections, development, governance, habitat, recreation, and water quality. And just as a reminder, refresher, the grading for each of these is on a 20-point scale. So if something got an A, that was between an 80 and 100%. And you'll notice that the water quality category is primarily grayed out because we just didn't have the data available to make across watershed comparisons. But comparing the grades, these are the 3 score wheels for the 3 geographies, the upper, the middle, and the lower watershed. And the lower, unsurprisingly, scored the lowest, while the middle scored the highest. So Kansas City is in all 3 of these watersheds. But the main takeaway here is there's room for improvement in all 3 sub-watersheds. So what I'm going to do for the rest of this presentation is just talk about the orange and red indicators on these 3 score wheels. So these are the D's and the F's, and this is where we have the most room for improvement. And we'll start with the lower watershed. So the lower watershed has 7 of its 14 indicators were a D or an F. And in the development and habitat categories, we had impervious surface, protected open space, riparian cover, and native habitat all scored a D or an F. And the impervious surface is measuring the percentage of land that's within 1,000 feet of a stream that is concrete, asphalt, a building, or some other impervious surface. Protected open space is measuring and grading the percentage of land that's protected in a conservation easement or in a park. Riparian cover is looking at the percentage of stream feet that has at least 100 feet of wooded vegetation on both stream banks. And native habitat is measuring the percentage of land that's being actively managed for native habitat. In the lower watershed particularly, it's important to keep in mind that the problems that are occurring upstream are impacting the lower watershed. So the low riparian cover score in the middle watershed and the low riparian cover score in the upper, along with native habitat and urban tree canopy, are further degrading the lower watershed. So I'm just going to show you a few satellite images starting in the upper watershed, where we have a lot of historically farmland, where there's a lot of agricultural fields that go right to the river and just have a narrow band of trees separating the ag field from the river. So that's what much of the Blue River watershed was at one point in time. So this is kind of a glimpse back in time, while also still present today. But that farmland is being converted into housing at a pretty quick rate in the upper watershed. So if the land hadn't already been stripped of trees and vegetation, it will be when the land is developed, and then the houses are put in, and sod is put in place of whatever the natural infrastructure was that was already there. Moving a little bit farther downstream, we have a lot of impervious surface, particularly in like shopping areas. But we also have quite a bit of riparian cover, and that's thanks in part to the streamway trails that have been created along the river. In the upper right-hand corner, you can see a decent amount of tree canopy in the developed areas, because we're looking at houses that are 30 years old or so at this point. Moving farther downstream, though, we go into the middle watershed. We have the Blue River and Brush Creek, which I call a tale of two streams. So the Blue River has a lot of parkland surrounding it. It has good riparian cover. It has high urban tree canopy, and it has low impervious surface. But when you look at Brush Creek, we don't have any riparian cover, actually. We have pretty high impervious surface. The stream itself is an impervious surface. But when we look at the housing, we have some pretty good tree canopy, because we're looking at houses that are 70 to 100 years old. So we have 70 to 100-year-old trees in front of those houses. We move down to the lower watershed. We get into the area that was controlled by the Army Corps of Engineers. So we have the stream banks, or the river's banks, are completely stripped of all wooded vegetation. But here at Blue Valley Park, there's quite a bit of tree canopy once we get away from the river. And then further downstream, we get to where it's very high impervious surface and no riparian cover. And again, the river itself is an impervious surface because it's been channelized and encased in concrete. So there's an interesting inverse image going here where the upper watershed has trees right along the river, whereas the lower watershed has no trees along the river. And this is really a cause and effect sort of situation where as we remove the natural infrastructure from the upper watershed and put in its place houses and storm drains, we increase the amount of water that's going into the river, and it's forced the Army Corps of Engineers to build this concrete channel that we have in the lower reaches of the Blue River watershed. So some things that can be done to raise the grade. For impervious surface, we can advocate for more green infrastructure, replacing the dated gray infrastructure, and also for like pervious pavers, similar to what's at Casey Water. For the riparian cover, we can incentivize planting hardy trees along the river's banks. For native habitat, we can incentivize creating spaces with multiple benefits for people and wildlife. And for protected open space, we just need to make sure that the spaces that are created, that create these native habitats will endure. So municipal farm is a pretty good example of that now. So moving around the wheel to the community connections category, we look at the awareness indicator, which scored a D in the lower watershed. So the category is reflecting like how people relate to the Blue River in both thought and action. So awareness is the thought, and behaviors indicator is the action. And a fairly astute observer pointed out how is awareness a lower grade than behaviors? Aren't our behaviors informed by what we know? And so I'll use the next couple of slides to demonstrate how we have a lower awareness grade than a behaviors grade. But the data for both of these came from Mid-America Regional Council's Community Planning Survey. So 2 survey questions. Behaviors question: have you or other members of your household dumped paint, motor oil, or other household waste into the street, a stormwater drain, or a lake or stream during the past year? And then a behaviors question. Do you think you can personally do anything to help improve water quality in lakes, streams, and other waterways in the Kansas City area? So the results in the lower watershed, only 21 people took the survey, which that in and of itself is a problem because we have a pretty high margin of error with only 21 people representing almost 100,000 people. But for the behaviors question, 90% of the people answering got it right, saying that they hadn't dumped anything. Whereas the awareness question, only 66% answered correctly, saying that yes, they can do something to help improve water quality. So what can we do? Each one of you can take the survey and tell other people about the survey. You can also do this in an official capacity when Mid-America Regional Council mails out those surveys, because we just need more people to take that survey. But what we can do to raise the grade is provide resources for community-led restoration projects like Blue River Rescue, because our actions really do inform our awareness. So when we get people actively doing things to restore the river, they see the value in it, and they learn to appreciate that what they do makes a difference. So moving around the wheel to collaborative governance, the question that we're asking here is, are cities and counties within the watershed on both sides of state line working together to attain and then maintain watershed health? And is there standardized water quality monitoring, and is there even a collective understanding of what watershed health is? And the answer to all those questions is no, that the cities and counties aren't collaborating. So what we can do is we can advocate to the city council and city departments about helping all the cities reach a collective understanding of watershed health and developing a comprehensive plan for developing the watershed to attain and then maintain watershed health. Standardizing water quality monitoring data and water quality data is also like super important, because we need to know how healthy the water is. And then finally, we need to ensure that Kansas City, Missouri's comprehensive plan includes attaining and maintaining watershed health. So the final indicator in the lower watershed, we're looking at the trails indicator. So this is part of the recreation category, which is just looking at how people interact with and enjoy the Blue River. And the trails indicator is looking at how many trails exist connecting communities to the Blue River. And we got this data from Mid-America Regional Council, and it's the percentage of the Metro Green that was completed. So first in miles, the lower watershed has 18.5 miles of paved Metro Green trail. So this is in contrast to 153 miles in the middle and 441 miles in the upper watershed. But the lower watershed is also the smallest watershed, so maybe looking at percentages is a bit of a fairer comparison. So the lower watershed has less than 30% of the Metro Green trail system installed, while the middle and the upper watershed are both over 50. So what can we do to raise the grade? We can encourage the use of the streamway trails, and also encourage building infrastructure to increase accessibility to streamway trails. We can also provide resources to organizations that are increasing trail networks and accessibility, like Walk KC. So moving up to the middle watershed, only 4 indicators got a D or an F in the middle watershed. And we're just going to look at 2 of those 4 because we've already seen 3 of them. So in the community connections category, the awareness indicator again scored a D, and I'm going to just show you the same 2 questions that I showed you before, but in the middle watershed, there were 125 survey takers, and all 125 of them said that they had not dumped in a lake or stream. Whereas when they were asked the question, can you do anything to help improve water quality, only 45% of them answered this correctly. So this contrast between these two responses demonstrates a disconnect between what people think and what they do. And what we really want to do is create a bridge connecting thought and action. So if we get people participating in active restoration rather than passively refraining from destroying, then they will begin to think that they can make a difference. In other words, we want to facilitate a commitment to community service so that what people think is a reflection of what they do. So moving to the one indicator that we haven't seen before, the stream visual assessment scored a D in the middle watershed. This stream visual assessment was really used as kind of a stand-in for all water quality data, because it was the only thing that we were able to get scored and graded, and that's because we did it ourselves. So the stream visual assessment is looking at how impacted the stream beds and the river beds are, as well as the bank composition and degradation. And in the middle watershed, we looked at 3 different sites using Vireo's stream asset inventory protocol, which they developed for Kansas City in 2005. And what we found in the middle watershed, where there wasn't stream modification, we had erosion, and then even so on Brush Creek, even in the upper reaches, we had stream modification. So both are not good under the stream visual assessment. So what can we do to raise this grade? We can advocate for planting more trees that are projected to fare well under the local stresses of climate change. So we put more trees there, that's going to stabilize the banks. But like broader, we need to advocate for more comprehensive water quality data. We don't want the stream visual assessment to stand in place of water quality data. We want it to supplement it. And then finally, the upper watershed had 5 indicators that scored a D or lower. And we've seen all but one of them already. And the one that we haven't seen is urban tree canopy. So this is using Mid-America Regional Council's NRI Landsat data. And going back to this slide where we compare the upper watershed with the lower watershed, a lot of land has been cleared of vegetation when you get away from the stream. So along the stream, we have a lot of trees in the upper watershed, but away from it, where there's agriculture, where there's houses going in, the land has been completely stripped of all of its trees. And this, as I mentioned before, there's a cause and effect here. We strip the land of trees upstream. It's going to result in more flooding downstream, and then drastic measures are taken. So what we can do is advocate for planting more trees, and also attend and advocate at city and planning commission meetings that are in cities upstream, like Overland Park, like Olathe, because what they're doing impacts Kansas City. So we've used this report card to develop our Blue River Action Plan, and I actually have PDFs that I can send of both the report card and the action plan for you to look at. But what I really want to is your input on what can the Environmental Management Commission do with this report card. And I'll also take any questions or comments that you have.
Is this information online?
It is. It is online. It's on our website.
I've got a question, Addison.
Yeah.
Most recently, the golf course that was trying to purchase that section of Blue River, and there was a lot of pushback, and I'm sure that your organization added their commentary to that, and it was stopped. But my question is, did you actually use the scorecard as part of this argument?
No, that's a great question, and I don't think we did. I think for the most part we were just encouraging the community to speak if they had an opinion on it.
Right. But this is a great tool, and I'm thinking this is one of the ways that it could actually be used when there was a threat to the watershed. Yes, you need everybody, we all wrote in and wrote letters and things, but this might be a more quantitative way to show council members, here's what's happening in this watershed, and this is how it would be impacted if this were to go from trees to golf course.
Yeah. I agree completely. Any more comments or questions? I am really curious. What could, because Heartland Conservation Alliance is just one organization. How could the Environmental Management Commission use this report card to further your work? We want it to be a tool not just that we use in advocacy, but a tool that can be used by the city as well.
Can it go on the city website? In some kind of environmental health link?
Yeah. Molly, we might be able to link to it through one of our Casey Green pages. We do put resources there. So I know at the very least we could put a link to it.
Addison, have you tried providing that survey to Center for Neighborhoods to just get more people to fill it out?
That's a great idea. We used the survey from 2018. So this year they're going to be doing again. It's a biennial survey that Mark takes. So I think that's a great place to push it out.
Hey, Addison, I know you didn't have water quality data in some of those. Is that because you didn't have water quality data available throughout all the reaches? Or was KC Water not forthcoming with that data? Because I know they tested on a regular basis.
It was, the issue was really that there's an abundance of data, but it just doesn't match up with. So what Kansas is collecting is different than what Missouri is collecting. Collecting, and the data that they were collecting was at different times, and you know how some data is very if it's a different time of day, if it's a different
temperature, yeah.
Yeah, like all these things come into play. So it just wasn't
You couldn't
compatible.
correlate, yeah.
Laura, we've talked about this the last time he was here, and Addison has been to my class a couple of times, that the area groups that are doing water quality collection are all doing different protocols. And so
Yeah.
it doesn't, and whatever they're doing, I think they ought to just stop at this point and everybody choose one and do it going forward. The stream teams, fabulous. All those schools, fabulous, but everybody's doing a different protocol. So it makes the data not compatible and therefore not usable.
Gotcha. Thanks.
I think we talked about that last time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I wasn't cool enough to be here last time, Marty.
I wasn't reflecting on not knowing. I was just saying we didn't do anything or nothing has happened on that front.
Addison, is there a particular protocol that you guys decide would be best, and then you could push it out to those various groups and say, please, we'd love you to continue doing this on whatever stream you're working on. Could you use this protocol?
I think that's a great idea. We're still trying to, like, we've been working with USGS on what the best data to collect. So we want to collect data that we can that tells the story, that is relatively easy to measure, mm-hmm. and is also something that we can change for the better over time. So those are the kind of the criteria that we're looking at when we want to when we collect water quality data. And maybe that isn't possible. Maybe we're just going to see a decline in using certain metrics over time. But
have you guys, are you going to do another watershed, or have you got your hands full with the blue?
I think the idea is to make it streamlined enough that other watersheds can do it as well. But right now we're just sticking with the Blue River. We're going to be making another report card in 2021 to see if anything has changed from 2019.
Okay.
Justin, have you guys ever worked with Trout Unlimited?
Trout Unlimited?
Yeah.
We have not.
When I worked, well, when I was an intern there, we had developed an app to make it easier for, because we were getting the anglers to collect some of our water quality data for us, since they'd be out there anyway. So there, I can't remember the name of the app though, but they might be really helpful because they're out fishing and they know the rivers and streams really well.
Thank you.
So Addison, it's kind of embarrassing that you ask us a simple question that we can't answer with a simple answer. I'm wondering what, so the Chesapeake went from serious trouble after a lot of these report cards to pretty decent quality. So what were the significant shifts that were made there, and which were done by cities and which were done by others?
You know, I don't have the answer to that question. I know that it was a lot. It was a collaborative process, so a lot of different agencies were involved. A lot of different organizations. It's really a collective impact sort of process that we're trying to build from nothing, like before we had a report card, and trying to get buy-in at this point.
Well, it seems to me like, I mean, obviously the city has a role because there's a big footprint there, but I'm kind of stumped myself. The first things that come to mind include that some of the partners might be IDA, Industrial Development Agency, since they fund all of that concrete that you're concerned about, and by providing the funding, they also have a voice in setting what are the rules. If you use our money, how do you develop? And so it seems like others like that, having a more complex support system beyond the city would be an important move if we could figure that out.
Getting some trees planted down in that lower area that's got so much concrete.
Yeah, right.
Although there is a potential public safety issue, the police generally don't like riparian vegetation because it's a hindrance to visual. That's more along, say, Brush Creek. But I don't know if that would apply in the industrial area.
They like the concrete, but how's that working out for them?
Yeah, not so well. But and it's not just Kansas City. That's a frequent issue in urban riparian.
Well, thank you, Addison. We appreciate you coming. We wish we had more to offer, but we're going to leave our thinking caps on.
And Addison, as you continue to learn, if you learn that our counterparts are doing in other cities that would be useful here, come back. Let us know.
Okay, I will do that. Thank you.
Thank you. The next thing on the agenda, I think we'll do is the Environmental Achievement Awards, Molly.
Okay. All right. Let me pull up my notes. Since we met, oh, that is my notes for the neighborhood and community. Since we met, Laura has gotten us additional information, but can everybody hear me?
Yep.
There were 7 nominations, which is healthy this year, 7 nominations. And we went through all the nominations and we decided on 6 to award. And we had questions about 3, but I think the information from Laura just enhanced the information we were looking for and support their nominations. So I don't think that's changed the nominations, it's just made them stronger. So Andy, I think somebody has mailed out all the nominations so that you guys can read them all if you'd like to. But I'll just quickly go through the 6 we've chosen. One is Make a Difference, and that was a collaboration between Parks and Communications, which is great because we love to see city departments collaborating with each other. And this was in response to the COVID shutdown and how do you continue to have community engagement. And actually, I don't have any PowerPoint to show you all the cool pictures, but they very quickly came up with these bright orange buckets with big stickers that said Make a Difference. And these you could curbside pick up. And it was a bucket full of supplies to go do a park cleanup. And there was also Communications provided a media campaign to make awareness of this. And so it was just since COVID, so it happened very, very rapidly. And as a result, 74 people volunteered. There were 257 hours of volunteer cleanup, totaling $6,500 in equivalent value. 19 parks or areas within parks were cleaned, 7 of them multiple times. They created and supplied 120 kits, and there were 5 media coverage of this. So we thought that was just great. It was creative. out of the box, happened fast, collaborative across the city and across city departments. And it got community engagement in a time when we're all backing off engagement. So that was one award. Another award is Lakeside Nature Center created a Raptor task force. And this task force, it turns out, was done in addition to normal duties. They did it on their own time, but what they did was rescue cute little fuzzies that fell out of nests and were able to get them back up into their nests, re-nest them or foster them and get them back up quickly so that they wouldn't have to go into the foster program. So and they are communicating now with other departments, the forestry departments, that maybe next year they'll be able to use the bucket lifts and get them up high and quickly and make it a city supported program. But they had 17 successful re-nesting, fostering, and we thought this was a great feel-good project, and it's also nature-oriented, less of the urban. And we are waiting on amazingly cute pictures of baby raptors to put into the presentation, because there's nothing cuter than a baby owl, a happy baby owl. They sleep face down because their heads are so heavy, which is something I learned about this. Okay, the next one, Kate Delahunt, the curriculum coordinator for KC Water, again, a COVID-related rapid response to developing environmental materials about water for area kids. And it involved pulling together all kinds of water information and creating learning materials that was virtual and that teachers could access. So it was Earth Week, but also just water materials, so that teachers who were teaching virtually could access this stuff for their students. So it was more water education, happened rapidly in response to COVID. So it was educational and got a lot of students involved. So, and I don't have the numbers on how many students were reached on that. Another one that we thought was good to award, although we've all done this, was the human resources team and the emergency telecommuting for the city. Just huge numbers, 900 city workers were supported on this as part of the return to work program. You know, having to leave City Hall and continue to do work from home. And so clearly, probably every department could have submitted a nomination for whatever they did during COVID, but we thought this one was a really strong one and sort of covers all the city departments and supported by the human resources team, sort of above and beyond getting 900 people back to work. And there's all kinds, sorry, Andy, this is the one provided just a tremendous amount of information on CO2 saved, gas not used by having everybody work at home. And we're thinking that as part of this award, we should encourage the city to think about continuing this because of all the wonderful environmental benefits that while it was done for COVID, we might be thinking this should be at some level part of city government going forward.
And Molly, it's already in the works.
Okay, thank you, Andy. And thank you for all the data, because some of these were data poor. This one was very data rich in all the wonderful environmental benefits.
Well, it was interesting while we were home through the month of April and May, Rick Usher, which kind of helped spearhead this for the city, he was constantly in touch with me and having me run the numbers on, you know, greenhouse gas savings and gasoline savings, and I mean, a wide variety of different things. So I was pulling all the models I could find between what was out there and what Mark had to come up with some numbers for him.
That was great. Okay, so another one is the tree working group of the Policy and Regulations Green Team. They did not plant trees, but what they have done have been working very, very hard to get the policy in place and get it adopted for the tree canopy support and enhancement. 8 city departments, 2 NGOs, so it's highly collaborative, and resulted in new regulation, new ordinance, and adopting the Urban Forest Master Plan. And it was 18 months of research and lots of meetings, and we thought that was very, very worthy. And somewhere down the road, there's the potential for another award when amazing numbers of trees are planted. And then we have one more, and these are very brief, so if you have questions. The Department of Revenue, Mr. Patrick Yu, was home working, apparently had time on his hands, and he did a pet project that has sort of been on the department's bucket list, but nobody had ever done it, and he took it upon himself to take a paper-based reference for all the legal opinion database and put it online and made a database for it. Because people who are working from home, normally they have to go and track down in this giant folder, notebook, ordinances to do their work. And then every time there is a change in the ordinance, this book has to be updated. And so he took it upon himself to make this into a database. It saves paper files. It makes everybody's working smoother, especially when you're working from home and you don't have access to the book that's back in the office. So I thought that was a wonderful thing, and we have agreed that we think that's a good award-worthy project. So that's 6 of the 7. Comments, questions?
I can't tell on my screen who our 26th person is. Have we reached a quorum?
I'm still at 7.
Okay.
Now, what I could do though, Carol, because there are some names, they may be kind of aliases or whatever, I could go over the 7 that I know and ask if there's any commissioners I'm missing.
Good idea.
Hey,
Okay.
Andy, the only one that I'm unsure of is that last one that's got the last 4 numbers of 1957.
Okay. Well, let me go through the roll that I've got. The commissioners that I know are here, and if there's any commissioners I haven't called out, please speak up. Carol?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Jensen?
He gave you a thumbs up.
That's a yes.
Okay. Molly?
Yes.
Marty?
That's
Nathan?
a yes.
Here.
And DJ?
Yes.
Any commissioners I miss?
Okay. What I would suggest is that we go ahead with this item and we try to reach consensus on what we think ought to happen. I can tell you that Scott participated on the review committee, and so we have already some feel for what his perspective would be on the awards, and so I am comfortable with proceeding on a consensus basis. Do we have any comments from commissioners? Could we have a vote of confidence? Everybody in favor of accepting the recommendation of the review committee, say aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? Turn on your sound and speak up. Okay. I think that we should record in the minutes that there was a consensus of commissioners present, a unanimous consensus, that the awards be given as recommended. And what we'll do is we'll reconfirm that when we approve the minutes the next time we have a meeting. I would like to move on now.
Carol, before you move on, can we pass over to Laura for a second to discuss the procedural aspect of the award ceremony?
Oh, sure, that would be great.
Hey, well, when I met with the folks that helped select the awards, we talked about the possibility of having this outside, but we never know how weather's going to be, and cases are still not leveling out. So it seems like a Zoom meeting at this point is the best way to go for the awards ceremony. And we decided that, or we talked about the possibility of having the mayor and or city manager record a little message to each winner while holding their award in his office, just saying, hey, this is a great thing that you guys did. We really appreciate you. And maybe we could have that video put in after each slide that Molly does for each particular item. That way we still have the mayor and city manager recognizing that these things are happening, which is kind of the point in having them there. And the city employees still get recognition from elected officials. But we're open to ideas. If anybody else on the commission has a better idea on how to structure that online awards ceremony. Do you have any ideas?
Laura, I think it's a great idea because that is the point, that they get recognized by the top management. And so that's a way to do it.
And then we figure we can get their awards to them after the ceremony at some point, just because we don't want them to not show up for the ceremony. We'll get their awards to them. Communications is still working. We can get at least a picture of them with their award, and then maybe get that on our website and then channel 2 on our weekly report so that those folks are recognized that way too.
And that gives us an opportunity to communicate to the mayor about the benefits of the work from home.
Yeah,
very much so.
I have some exciting news. I just received a text identifying the number 1957 as Julie, and she said that she had to get off her phone to send me the text, but that she definitely votes yes, so we can have an official quorum-based vote on the awards. That's a nice place to be.
Yeah.
Poor Julie.
So hopefully she'll get back on, but when you see the number 1957, that's Julie back on. So I'm kind of excited about the idea of having the mayor and city manager record something about the different recipients, because I think it gives us a chance to reinforce what we think about what good work they're doing. Sometimes if you have to say the words yourself, I think they make a more lasting impression. So I'm excited about that proposal, Laura. I really am.
Have you put something into the mayor's office? Because as I recall, you have to put it in way, way, way early to get his attention on things.
I have not, because I wanted to make sure it was okay with you guys, but we've got some connections, so we'll make it happen. Hopefully Morgan will
maybe he could be the moderator this year.
Ooh. I don't know about that one.
It might be a reach.
That's probably a stretch, but I bet we can get him to record 6 little blurbs about people and groups of people.
That would be good.
And I have confidence that you can draft something pretty persuasive.
I was going to say, I can draft something up. Do you want me to send it to the commission for review? Yeah, the work group will be happy to do that. Okay. Molly's always been the star of putting this together. No question about it. No question.
Okay.
Okay. Well, everybody feel good about that? I feel super good about that.
We had a lot of people this year. That was good. And they're good awards.
Yeah, I think so too. And we're going to have some really cute baby raptor pictures.
Yeah, otherwise they don't get their picture.
I have the cute baby raptor pictures in my phone. I just have to download them to my computer so I can send them to you. Because Kim's no longer with the city, and so she's like, I'll text them to you. So they're here. They're cute.
Are we ready to move
They're
on?
in nests.
Oh.
Oh, little babies in nests. Oh. All right,
Well,
that's all I've got.
Yeah, the next item on the agenda is not cute at all. We heard from Robin Martinez, who is a former commissioner, and he was expressing concern about a proposed rule change regarding the disposal of nuclear waste. And Andy sent that out to everybody. This is not, this is not an area that I feel qualified to make any sort of judgment about. I mean, certainly respect Robin's concerns. And we've shared this with Scott, who's not with us today, but he informed me that Midwest Research Institute does do some disposal of radioactive waste and has someone who's in charge of that, who can actually take a look at this and let us know specifically what kind of comments might be desired. It's also the kind of rule that may be of interest to the City Solid Waste Department, the City Water Department, OEQ, and the Health Department, because it raises the issue of having radioactive materials. I thought brownfields perhaps as well would want to know about this rule. What I would ask for is authorization to share this and to express the EMC concern that people who know more about it take a look at it and advise the city as to whether or not they need to formally comment. Does anybody else have a different suggestion? I do think Scott is going to be able to help us understand this. He just couldn't be here today.
We also have some radiation specialists at the university too.
Yeah, do you all share my concern that we need to follow up on this? The comment period has been extended to October 21st. So we would have another chance to meet before the comment period closes. But if this is something that the city council needs to comment on, it probably needs to be raised through the staff channels prior to that time. Would you agree, Andy?
Oh, yeah.
I think you're on a good path. I think Robin might spend a little more time and help. He knows the commission, he knows the city. It might be appropriate for him to suggest what he thinks is appropriate, number one. I do think MRI could help, but I also think Andy Bracker could help us
with Brownfield.
Look at this. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that I just think we need to be aware of it and we need to not ignore it. We need to go ahead and follow up.
Yeah.
Everybody in agreement with that? Okay.
I see thumbs up.
Thumbs up. I don't think we need to take official action because what we need to do is know more. So the next thing on the agenda, I believe, is Andy.
Okay. Give me 1 second. Okay, so this is going to be kind of a variety of different issues here that I'm going to kind of cover. Some good, some bad. Just as a heads up, the mayor's office apparently is taking an active role at looking at the committees and commissions. And so I was contacted by a Cookingham Knoll management fellow who's putting together the list of all the committees and commissions and any information we have as far as the creating ordinances related to those commissions. So if you have not already, you should be very shortly receiving an email from Sydney Bannister. And in that email, you'll probably see a link to complete a survey. That survey is more or less to have you verify your contact information, as well as they're also collecting demographic information. And they'll explain to you why they're doing that. So I don't have the specifics on that, but that's kind of what it was explained to me, what they're looking for. So make sure you check your emails, spam or whatever. It should be out this week if it hasn't already been sent.
I received it today.
Oh, okay, great. Yeah, I think the deadline was supposed to be August 21st. Is it still that? Is that what they had set?
Yes, I think that's right.
Okay. So it was August 21st, 5 p.m. is what the deadline was to complete the survey link. So just a heads up reminder to get that done so that the mayor's office can get a full picture of where we are with the current commissions.
Who's the email from?
I'm sorry?
Who is the email from?
The name is Sydney
Okay.
Bannister. Okay, next off is the budget. So today the Finance Committee met. The budget amendment ordinance had been delayed or held for several weeks to give council time to work with staff on the various proposals that were on the table. So today they met and they did vote to pass it on to full council on Thursday, so it was advanced. Where they are now is at about $23.6 million reduction in terms of program cuts and staff reductions. We're looking at a hiring freeze, which will go into place, saves them another $4.8 million, and then a furlough for city employees that really only affects the general fund employees. It will not affect the fire department, the police department, water services, and aviation. So of that, with the furlough, you save another $2.2 million. So overall, gets you to about $30.6 million. The target was $38 million. So almost there, but not quite. So there's probably some more work to be done this current fiscal year. So, and I'm kind of going over this just to kind of give you the framework of where we're at, just the economic conditions that we're dealing with some of our programs. On top of that, that doesn't fix the overall structural problem that the city's having. The finance department is projecting that over the next 5 years, we're going to have about a $148 million budget shortfall. So the plan is to cut another $56 million next fiscal year. And if those are permanent cuts, that should cover the full 148 over the course of the 5 years. So anyways, the future is looking rough, to say the least. The finance department will be monitoring this on a monthly basis and of course, keeping council informed. The thing that I'd like to bring to your attention, I sent out an email last week about the recycling program, just to put it on your radar, just for you to be aware of it. One of the things that happened today during the Finance Committee was a very robust conversation about recycling. And the proposal from Neighborhood and Housing Services was to move the curbside program to a bi-weekly schedule. And by doing so, that would save the city about $2 million. So some council members kind of objected to that. In lieu of that, the proposal that Neighborhood offered, instead of the recycling change, would be to look at the leaves and brush drop-off contracting that we do, looking at mowing of all the vacant lots, the land bank properties, the mowing program, and moving that from 7 mowings to 6 mowings per year. So those particular issues that were raised as options, of course, raised various concerns for District 3 and District 5, because they looked at if they don't get the mowings done on these lots at the current service level of 7, that increases urban blight and other issues regarding that. And it was a little discouraging to hear them go on about more mowing on these vacant lots. So I know that the commission has looked at this issue in years past and wanted to just kind of raise it to your attention again, that what happened today is that the Council Finance Committee decided to pull off the table the $2 million cut from Neighborhood and Housing Services So the recycling and all those other options that were presented, pull them out of the budget amendment package today, but to be revisited in the near future, this current fiscal year, to come up with a plan. Lots of ideas. When they got into the recycling conversation, it came up about the rolling carts issue. You know, Heather Hall was very much interested in bringing that issue back to the table. Mike Shaw was there to speak to this, talked about the $3 million expense of bringing carts to all of the residents of Kansas City to basically get that program up and running. Councilman McManus, when they talked about going to every other week, they talked about what's the implications of that. If we don't have rolling carts, then are people going to store the recycling for 2 weeks, or are they going to throw things in the trash, increase the amount of trash we're disposing, which then increases costs in that regard. So all kinds of facets to this conversation. I today just want to make sure you're aware that this is on the table for future conversations and discussions with council. Going to try to see about getting inserted into some of those conversations. Mike Shaw and John Wood with neighborhoods is clearly going to be in this because the budget for this comes out of that department.
One thing you might do with the lots could have a cocktail of cover crop seed planted. You'd leave it the whole year and you wouldn't mow it at all. And it's a poor man's compost because all you have to do is pay for the seed and all of that material becomes composted. Now, a little education might have to happen because they're going to see 8 foot tall milo or, you know, something like that. So, but it's ecologically sound. It would be improving the soil content, you know, the soil, improve the soil, and it would be sequestering more carbon.
Yeah, and those are important. But when you said 8 feet, is that that's the concern in the sense that Councilman Robinson looks at anything that's beyond 12 inches as a weed that promotes dumping and blight for her district. And John, you know, he brought up that most of the land trust properties are in District 3 and District 5. So even though there's some mowing that would be cut back in all the districts, those are the primary areas where it's being affected. And
we could start with Luce Park and do a big swath there.
Yeah.
And I don't know.
Marty, is there anything that's shorter though? You know.
Oh yeah, we could.
2 feet. Buffalo grass or that's not a good one though.
Soybeans.
Yeah. I mean, there's a mixture of seeds, and I think we could come up with something that might be more polite.
Okay. Well, put your thinking cap on because we're going to need some ideas here.
Okay.
Yeah. The other thing we've talked about different times is you can have mowing of a clean edge and have it look intentional. So you don't have to mow the whole lot. If you mow the front and get a clean edge so that it looks intentional, you might be able to cut the mowing dramatically.
Yeah. Basically, every mowing cycle is about a $250,000 cost to the city.
Right. And if they could, even if every other mow was just to the clean edge and then they mowed the whole lot the other times, it's worth looking at. I don't know why we don't push that more.
Yeah. You know, so it opened up the whole can of worms in that conversation, and I would say to the kudos to Councilman Hall, she did open up the door on looking at the city properties, which is something we've talked about in-house a lot of times is, you know, are we really using city facilities to the fullest extent? I mean, even in City Hall, we have a few floors here that are completely vacant, whereas we have some offices out on 63rd Street or Blue Parkway that we're leasing space from. And so, you know, when we're asking the city architect, you know, what are our assets? Where are our properties? Where are our buildings? To be honest with you, it's pretty scary that they don't quite have a clear understanding where that is. And it's our staff in our compliance side where we do our regulatory inspections every year. We've got probably one of the more comprehensive lists of where the properties are. Shouldn't be that way, but that's sort of the way it looks. So, you know, what assets does the city have that we can shed, we can lease, we can sell, whatever. So they're moving forward with an ordinance to look at that as a possibility as well. Okay. All right, so just wanted to kind of cover a little bit about that. By the way, if you're interested about fire and police, whereas the rest of the general fund had to cut about 4.5%, fire and police came in at about 2.25. So they did end up contributing something. Although, again, they're not part of the furlough program. Moving on to brighter topics. So the climate action planning process that we're on in response to the ordinance or the resolution that passed back in May, we issued a request for information back about a month ago, which went out through our procurement office. We asked for, you know, what basically the cost would be for completing a climate action plan for Kansas City through an equity lens. We received, I think that was out for 3 to 4 weeks. And we received 7 responses total, which was good. And basically it was kind of a wide range of costs. The median of that was about, right about $150,000 was the median for the responses that we got. So where we're at now is staff has been working on a draft RFP, which is the formal request that will, again, go out through our procurement folks for an official bid for doing the climate action plan with us. So along with the drafting of that plan, we're going to be touching base with the Climate Protection Steering Committee. So Bob, this involves you guys. So we'll be looking to get together later this month to garner some input from the steering committee on that draft before we put it out through procurement. So we've got some broader general issues we just kind of want to run through the steering committee before we issue that request for proposal. So we'll be doing that later this month. Kind of related to that, I'm kind of working through the behind the scenes administrative aspects of getting that ready to go. So, you know, how do we deal with the financing of that and those questions? I'm dealing with the executive team to figure that out. So moving forward, not as quick as we would like. You know, we're learning as we're going on this process, and anything with our procurement folks always seems to take a little longer than we'd expect, but still moving forward. Any questions before I move on to the next thing? Okay, hearing none. Just one of the things that the commission does have some interest in is the compliance aspect of the city. So I don't usually speak to that very often. And I guess that's good in the sense that there's usually not too many regulatory problems that we're having, that, you know, we're right on top of that. But I did want to just let folks know that we are, again, staff has begun another round of compliance monitoring of our city facilities. And for those commissioners and those that are listening, you know, we have over 320 facilities. Everything from the airport to the zoo. So it's a lot of operations to cover with our inspectors. So we go through them annually and checking how they manage their hazardous waste, their clean air, clean water, all the various regulatory requirements that we have to comply with as city operations. So started that. The biggest thing in the compliance side right now is that the work order system that we use to basically direct city staff to make corrections in whatever they're doing on the environmental side. The system that we've been using is going away, and we're switching to a new system, work order system. So just kind of throwing that out there. Just want to let you know that we are still actively monitoring regulatory compliance, and this particular project is going to burn up some of our staff time to get through that. Training is another thing I want to mention. Obviously with COVID, our office provides environmental training for city staff in terms of spill response, awareness level training on asbestos, lead, all those kinds of various issues, so that staff can do their job safely, as well as meeting certain regulatory requirements. So we've had to start converting some of our courses into online courses. So staff has been figuring out how to create video training. So they're learning, and everybody in the office is involved in some aspect of this. So whether you're writing scripts or you're doing voiceovers or whatever. So it's been a very busy past month for staff, just focusing on so many different issues. Moving back into sustainability a little bit, just want to throw out this about the energy code. Had a conversation with Greg Franzine in city planning, the building official. Basically, as you recall, the council did pass a resolution kind of delaying the adoption of the energy code until the 2021 IECC came out and was published. So what Greg seems to be thinking at this point is he wants to give the stakeholders time, staff, council, give them a chance to read the code, to kind of get up to speed on it, to allow for any analysis that needs to be completed, particularly maybe the analysis by DOE, by any other, third parties or independent parties that are out there. So it seems to me that he's also interested in doing another round of stakeholder engagement meetings, similar to what he did with the original building code. So the time frame, it sounded like to me that he'd be looking at sometime after the new year, after January. So as that gets refined, I'll certainly let people know. But just to kind of, based on our latest conversation earlier this week, I think that's where we are on the timeline on the new code. Last thing I'll just throw out there is the comprehensive plan, of course, Casey Spirit, the Casey Spirit playbook. Just want to put in your calendar, there is a virtual town hall meeting that they are planning. It's August 27th at 5 o'clock. So make sure you go to the playbook. You can email them at playbook@kcmo.org, or you can go to their webpage and kind of register. But it's your opportunity to kind of get some input into the comprehensive planning process through that virtual town hall forum. So of course, and that is going to also help us tie into our climate action planning. So whether you feed into that or you feed into our climate planning process later this year, either way, that would be just a good thing. Okay, so I think I've covered a lot of territory there. Any questions?
Andy, any feedback on what kind of response there's been to the playbook? How many people are online at this point?
I have not gotten any numbers or stats from Kyle yet about that. Lara, have you heard anything?
Gotta unmute. Have I heard anything on how many people are
Responding to the playbook?
Yeah.
No, we got some information on just the environmental section specifically, and there were about 40 or so responses in that one. But that's just like we want you to actually put in data. And there's so many ways to respond to the playbook. So you can go in and you can take the daily poll, which you just click a box. And
Right.
so I haven't gotten anything from them yet. That's something we could probably ask for an update though for next meeting.
Thanks.
Okay, that's all I had, Carol.
Well, thank you. Are we ready for the discussion about Evergy?
Yes.
Yes, yeah.
I just want to start off by saying thank you, Commission, for letting me come on and talk to you about Evergy. My name is Bridget Sanderson. I'm the Director of Environment Missouri. I do also have with me Billy Davies from Sierra Club and Beth Pauley from Climate and Energy Project to help out with any questions at the end. I know that we're really short on time, so I'm going to try to make this as succinct as possible. So I'm going to start off by kind of giving you a little bit of an overview, and then about the merger with Evergy, and then an emerging coalition that we've put together because of this news, and then also give you an update because a week ago there was an update from Evergy about the merger status. So with that, early next year in 2021, feels like a century from now, Evergy will actually file a long-range plan, which I'm sure most of you are already familiar about. They're called an Integrated Resource Plan, or an IRP, with the regulatory branches in both Kansas and Missouri. This IRP will, of course, outline how the utility intends to provide safe, reliable, and affordable electricity over the next 20 years. And I know, I'm unsure about Kansas, Beth might know this a little bit better, but I know in Missouri, they have to file these every 3 years and give about yearly updates about their progress. So this will actually be Evergy's first IRP since the merging of KCP&L and Westar Energy when that happened back in 2018. And then also, fun fact, is also the first utility IRP in Kansas history ever. So Evergy, on top of all of this news, on top of all of this IRP process, Evergy was also undergoing an internal review process to determine whether it might merge with another utility company or follow a new path, follow a different path, standalone process to improve their performance. So with that, a bunch of advocacy groups came together with the news of the possible merger, and we also had heard that there was pressure coming from Evergy, one of Evergy's investors, investor group called Elliott Management. A vision for a new Evergy was actually formed, which is an emerging coalition of Kansas and Missourians, including communities of color, advocacy groups, and low-income communities. And we built this coalition basically eager to work with Evergy to achieve a robust stakeholder IRP process, as well as providing Kansas City with a sustainable and equitable future. So we wrote down 3 basic principles that I'll go through. So we have called on Evergy for the first one is to empower organizations led by the most impacted members of our communities, particularly our Black, Indigenous, and people of color, as well as low-income and renter communities, to dismantle systems of oppression with energy within the energy industry. We know that the Kansas and Kansas City metro area are actually high energy burden areas, meaning that low-income, African-American, Latino, and renters actually pay up to 3 times more than the average household on home energy costs. This year, a study was actually commissioned by the Kansas Corporation Commission, which is the Kansas branch of the Public Service Commission, determined that the utilities covering these regions had the highest and 4th highest, respectively, increases in rates among 23 Midwest investor-owned utilities in the past decade. And so, part of the coalition, we want to have those voices at the table during this IRP process and get their voices actually heard, because they're the ones who are the most affected by this. Our second principle is actually to retire Evergy's coal plants by 2025 and commit to no new expensive fossil fuel infrastructure, which will both, of course, as you all know, improve public health and reduce electric bills, because a lot of the burden is basically put onto ratepayers to keep coal plants running. Evergy currently has no plans to retire their current coal plant assets. until the end of their lifeline between 2040 and 2050 is usually what we're predicting for the actual retirement of them. And we know with the climate crisis, we actually need to speed that up quite a bit. And then the third principle is to decarbonize Evergy's electric generation fleet by 2030 by investing in efficiency, renewable energy, and storage, which will both create jobs and reduce electric bills, which is where you guys come in. So just a little bit more background. So our coalition, A Vision for a New Evergy, actually contacted Evergy in early July, trying to reach out and provide an opportunity for the utility to participate in crafting a strong vision for the future of Kansas City. Unfortunately, the utility did not respond. So our next move was actually to go through Climate Action KC, where they facilitated a meeting between Evergy, the coalition, A Vision for a New Evergy, and then the Policy Committee of Climate Action KC. That meeting went pretty well. Policy Committee was mostly there to kind of hear both sides of the story, what our principles were from the coalition, and then also Evergy came on to discuss a little bit about their COVID relief plan and some of the work that they have been doing towards sustainability up until that point. So with regards to the merger and an update, a week ago, Evergy actually announced their sustainability transformation plan, is what it's called. It includes a standalone process instead of following through with a sales process. So with this announcement, Evergy actually provided pretty vague, but also overall incredibly ambitious goals for their future as a utility company. And this includes decarbonizing by 85% based on the 2005 levels by 2030 and 100% by 2040. I'm sure most of you know their last targets were actually 80% by 2050. So a lot more ambitious. And we know that, and we're very excited about these ambitious goals. While these targets are very ambitious, it looks like Evergy will actually depend on the IRP in order to have any specific targets in place. They're just saying that they think that they can reach these goals at this point. And then, of course, they said that the plan is dependent on securitization for a smooth transition through end of life at the state level, grid modernization, demand side resources and energy efficiency, utility scale renewables and storage, electrification, and workforce transition. So with that announcement on last week, our coalition is still emerging and we're still working strong. We're very hopeful to bring in more low-income communities and community groups across the Kansas City entire metropolitan area. And we are actually wanting to have Evergy have a more transparent and robust stakeholder process for their IRP. So we think that this is one way that we can actually, have people come to the table with their utility companies and provide a better future, quite honestly, for our metropolitan area. So with that, I guess I might, so I was gonna say we can start to ask questions right now, but I might just go ahead and tell you why, we're telling you all this other than to get the information out there about what's going on with our utility company. So we are actually curious if the Environmental Management Commission would write a letter of recommendation to the City Council as part of the wonderful climate protection plan that the City Council put forward this year. Again, it feels like a century ago. We think that we need to ensure that Evergy actually follows these principles that the Kansas City Council has put into place through their climate protection plan and their goals basically through this climate protection plan. And so we're asking EMC basically to write a letter to ensure that Evergy follows the goals that you all the City Council all put into place and the targets put into place for the IRP process, and also to have a robust stakeholder process as well, so everybody's voice is heard. So with that, I know that was very quick and very brief, and energy stuff can get wonky. So I will go ahead and open it up to questions, and again, I have Beth and Billy here to help out, just in case.
Sure.
So with that, I know that was very quick and very brief, and energy stuff can get wonky. So I will go ahead and open it up to questions, and again, I have Beth and Billy here to help out, just in case.
Okay.
Well, Bridget, first of all, great report and nice work. We appreciate that. I'm sure my colleagues will have other thoughts about this, but it feels to me like it would be helpful if you would help us with kind of a strategic plan on what might be effective. I mean, yeah, you know, I'm sure everybody's going to want to write a letter of support, but what's normal? What's really, what creates leverage? And what do we know about other than what Evergy announced? My assumption would be we should expect more cooperation, better performance under this new announcement than we would have previously. But you all know more about this than we, and so maybe you could help us put together kind of the perfect strategy, which everybody would have to review and get comfortable with. But that might be one way we could look at this.
Yeah, so that's a great question, Bob. Thank you so much. So one thing about these IRP processes, at least in Missouri, because Missouri has had them before, we don't know how it's going to go in Kansas, quite honestly, but that doesn't, I mean, Evergy does, yes, of course, serve both states. And so, you know, we're kind of going around to each one of the stakeholders. But with the Missouri side, you know, the IRP process is, it's a little bit behind a like black box almost. And so we're wanting it to be a more transparent process for more open engagement, more public comment periods. I think that Billy, maybe check me if I'm incorrect on this, but I'm pretty sure that the last comment period for this IRP, because they've already started the IRP process at this point, because they have to file it early next year. So I'm pretty sure that the first public comment period already passed. I think it was last week was the last time, or the last date. And so, you know, as an environmental advocate, I didn't, you know, like it's hard to find out these dates and find out about it. And so what we are thinking from you as EMC is basically just, you know, trying to get the information out there to the city council and just be like, you as city council have a voice as the representatives of Evergy's customers, right? To be a massive stakeholder in this process and be able to get it actually involved in the IRP process and represent their constituents as well.
I would think they'd want to do that given the emphasis on tenants' rights and the things that are moving forward now, because this is very much a part of it.
I can say that tenants' rights is definitely something that we have prioritized in the coalition. Two core tenants' rights groups have committed to signing on and to being a part of the coalition. And so that is where our principles lie. We do see that, you know, energy access foils in with the housing crisis, and especially right now, all of these problems are being illuminated. Kansas City Public Schools, I'm sure you all saw, sent a letter of demands around energy access, since they will be hosting digital schools or work from home, remote schools at least this fall. And how will children who don't have access to energy be able to work remotely? And so there are a number of inequities that, you know, that we are seeing right now with the COVID crisis. And these, you know, of course existed before COVID, but this crisis is presenting an opportunity for us to interrogate how all of these things fit together. And so, you know, I can't speak for Evergy, but that is something, this is one of the reasons why we formed the coalition, so that we can expand the voices who have a seat at the table to determine how energy policy is crafted.
And if I may just, oh, go ahead, Professor Davies.
Oh, I was just going to say, it's also not just tenants. There are people who are low income and own their houses, for which this is a huge. Have you gotten any of the neighborhoods on board as part of this coalition?
Say that is the next step. So we you know, we were kind of waiting to see where the direction went with whether or not they were going to merge, because obviously that coalition would look very vastly different from eastern Missouri to western Kansas. Now that we know the direction that the utility is going to go, we will know exactly, we will have a better idea of who to target. So, but they are definitely on the list to engage.
I missed the name of the coalition. Oh, sorry, Billy.
Go ahead, Laura.
I was just wondering what the name of the coalition was so I could have it for when we start our plan.
It's a vision for a new Evergy.
I didn't get it all. I just got new Evergy. Okay.
Fair.
All right, thank you.
And Billy Davies, Sierra Club, was just in response to Chairman Berkebile's comment about like what are the pressure points, what are the opportunities to weigh in? Just as Bridget noted in her opening, is Evergy has gone from that initial plan submitted earlier this year, late last year, about this 80% reduction in emissions by 2050. And then recently, after it's at the same time as its announcement that it's going to be standing alone, will not be merging, setting this aspirational, still to be worked out goal of 85% carbon reduction by 2030. Now, it's kind of a question you go up from that is what has happened in the interim? Well, you have the metropolitan area working to set bold targets for climate action, centering equity and the health and future of its residents. And at the same time, you have Kansas City Mo kind of leading the way among those jurisdictions, as we've seen with the passage of Resolution 05, setting its own targets, and even more recently, taking action on those goals with the measure regarding the building code, the energy efficiency codes, becoming one of the first jurisdictions in the United States to kind of set that preliminary goal. And so Evergy said when it kind of made its announcement that a lot of this is going to be informed by the IRP process and thus by the stakeholders. And so Kansas City Mo, as one of its largest stakeholders, will have a role to play in the IRP process, but also just generally. As you continue to make targets for bold climate action, they will have to listen. And this board, the EMC, has played a vital role in all of these conversations. You submitted letters regarding the Climate Protection Plan resolution. You submitted comments regarding the energy efficiency codes. And so, kind of talking about pressure points and the role or potential role for this commission is that it's clear that, the council values this perspective of the commissioners here and city staff. And I think especially as we're approaching the stakeholder and comment process for the Climate Protection and Resiliency Plan, we would appreciate, if possible, as you all are preparing comments, and I know it's been discussed about comments on the energy efficiency code, incorporating those comments. They would value your perspective, and I think so would the public.
So, Billy, I'm sure we all appreciate that. I guess one of the things that maybe you all could help us with, and if not, then you and we together need to get the help, I think, is to have an idea of what are the pressure points for Evergy, right? They're now setting this more appropriate goals. And obviously a part of this dialogue with respect to equity and avoiding these burdensome rates in some areas of our city where they're least appropriate. Presumably from their side of the equation, that reduces revenue and increase costs, because I have a feeling they have to upgrade some of what's going on in those communities to make that work. And so I could imagine them asking us to also become their advocates when they try to work out a different deal on how they retire those coal-fired plants that they've hung on to because the financing is still in place. And so what I'm looking for is kind of an overall picture of what can we develop between us and them that is in our mutual best interest. And so, you know, it looks to me like there's some level of understanding would inform this conversation and our letters and ultimately our action. And I just, for me, I'm not knowledgeable enough to know what all those points are. And I suspect some of you do, most of you do maybe, but I think helping us with that larger picture could be really important in how effective these letters might or might not be ultimately. That makes sense?
Yeah, and you know, as the three of us as advocates, I'm not really sure that we have a wonderful intel on like what the pressure points are with Evergy. We know that all of this came about because they got a lot of pressure from one of their investors that I had mentioned about before. So that is obviously one of them as well. And you know, we're hoping that's kind of alongside the same lines of what Billy just said, and I don't want to keep repeating, but is that since Kansas City is such a large stakeholder in Evergy's utility area, I guess you could say, that as city council of the Kansas City area, that would be another pressure point. So that I don't know if that completely answers your question, but I think that that's the best answer that I have.
Okay.
And I don't know that this is a pressure point, but I did want to elevate that their sustainability transformation plan that they released, while ambitious with decarbonization, did not mention equity at all. And so I would ask that if the EMC does take action, that is a consideration as well. It's one of the core principles on why this coalition was formed. So.
Sure. Well, it's one of the things. It's one of the things will motivate the council too, of course. So that's kind of an easy one. But again, if we want this to work with Evergy and we really want to accelerate good outcomes, then it would be helpful to know what are the other tools in our quiver.
Here, Bob, and also, you know, kind of I want to, you know, lift up kind of, you know, the tension you raised about kind of like what are the, being able to figure out the pressure points, like is it, like how do we actually move a big company like Evergy? Like we can acknowledge that we all as stakeholders can weigh in, and Evergy is able to set up a plan that accepts and declines to accept certain recommendations over others. But some of this will ultimately come to down the road be up to a commission, like the Public Service Commission in Missouri or the KCC. And so in Missouri, I know that the Public Service Commission has said that utilities need to take into consideration commitments by cities and counties regarding climate action, as the city has done with its resolution. And so, some of this is like, yeah, it's figuring out how to work with Evergy, and we really hope, we all hope to, as much as we can. But some of this is also just setting targets for what is in line with Kansas City's goals.
Right.
And then just as long as they're heard.
And I would say, as far as insight with Evergy, I saw that Jensen dropped the Public Service Commission. Jeff Mark is the chief economist for the Missouri Public Service Commission, and I'm sure that he would be more than happy to talk with you all on, his insight with the IRP process. He advocates for consumers. He contributed to my testimony with the energy disclosure in the Tenants Bill of Rights that unfortunately got gutted, but he does have a lot of insight with how these things work, and he has the consumer advocate perspective. So I can put one of you in touch with him.
That would be great. And it's Jeff whom? Jeff
Mark.
Mark, okay.
I'm sure you all have heard of the Pay As You Save on Bill financing program.
Yeah.
So he's been a really big part in making that happen. But I'm sure he would know of pressure points.
Thanks.
I have another question that takes it in a sort of a different realm, and that is about the awareness piece. everyone is learning through COVID, the general public, about all these things that are not working. And I'll bet you the vast majority of people have no idea about this inversion of who pays the most for energy. And they would assume that low income places, you know, they just don't. And they don't understand that. And part of getting the public on board and the city on board and people in the city to motivate their council members, how do you get this awareness out? And I think we're at a really good time to do that, because people are on board with Black Lives Matter and they are learning a ton. And this is certainly something that could be part of that community engagement. And while those of us who are in this field and Sierra Club, and we love you, but not everybody follows that. And in fact, probably a tiny majority of Kansas Cityans. So how do we raise that awareness, and maybe in a different arena, in a different way, that makes people more aware of who's paying for what?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that, you know, as far as this coalition goes, we got together really swiftly and we are building the ship as we go, but that is an area that we definitely want to do more of, is, you know, raising awareness. And we also want to amplify the most impacted people, which is why kind of our go-to partners in the first, you know, round of this stakeholder process were the housing activists, some of the, you know, lower income activists who know exactly what we're talking about. So we have already kind of started that process, but certainly that we definitely want to continue doing more of. So I definitely anticipate some more, some broader public engagement and storytelling around that.
Mm-hmm. That would be good. The commission is so sick of hearing about my various classes, but I just ended one, and one of, you know, they have a series of assignments which they can do online, and they do a water assessment of their personal household usage, and they do an energy assessment, and the big picture is the OMG, do I really use that much? And they don't even get to this point of awareness. They don't pay attention to their bills, or not very much, until they sort of walk through this. So there's definitely a storytelling piece there. We're going to be going back and forth with Evergy, but I think there's also a piece too in the public awareness. So I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, and I do think, kind of off of Beth's point, is that one of the goals with this coalition that we all came together is basically to make this an educational tour, because, you know, we're all technical experts at this point, you know, like, and so we understand it, but we think that it is, you know, unfair for people to just be paying these bills that are, you know, not fair or equitable at any cost. So,
and this is a moment to get that out there.
Well, I think we're probably not through talking about this, but I don't think.
But maybe for now.
Yeah, but maybe for now. But we probably need to follow up beginning in October and kind of get a better idea of what exactly we can do and how it would be most helpful.
Absolutely. I will. Thank you again so much for having us. I will go ahead and put my email address in the group chat if anybody has personal questions or anything that wants to come to me, and I'm sure that Beth and Billy would be willing to do that as well. So
I would just jump in just really quickly, because way down on the liaison updates, I'm at the very end with the Volcker Energy Hub, and Scott is not here, but it relates to your guys' presentation. Nothing major. It's just the Sustainability Committee at UMKC met two Fridays ago, and our guest was Bob Simmons, who is the head of facilities for UMKC, and this was on the agenda to discuss with him, because we have been pushing for UMKC to get on, because we are a large municipal energy user. So, and we're facilitating a meeting between him and Kevin Brennan. So nothing yet, but we're still working on that. Okay, I'm done.
Okay, thank you. I think we'll move on, but Bridget, Beth, Billy, get back to us. Stay in touch with us. We won't have a regular meeting in September because it will be our awards ceremony, but probably, right, Andy?
That's the plan.
That's the plan. And so our next regular meeting will be in October.
Yeah.
Or maybe by then we'll have lots of more very specific ideas about what's next. Thank you so much for your time today. The next thing we have is our follow-ups. Do we have any committee reports? On the liaison updates, the Air Quality Forum did not meet this month, and there's nothing new on the transportation plan. Does anybody, Bob, do you have anything to report?
On the housing, it's still, housing is still on neutral in terms of the climate protection. I think Andy already gave the report.
All right.
We're going to meet soon and try to support the staff.
Yeah, ask him in 2 weeks.
I actually have an update on the Neighborhood Planning and Development Committee.
Good.
I have been listening to these. They're very long. That is a hard-working committee. It is hours and hours, but you know, it's my new podcast. And I don't think it's useful to recite all of my notes on this, but there was one interesting thing that that is relevant to us. And Bob, you probably know more about it. 30th and Summit Apartments on the west side. And Gloria isn't here today. But it's interesting because they bought some land. They want to build a series of what they were initially proposing as family apartments out of containers. You know, stacking them all up, very modern, very cool looking, supposedly affordable. And it's an interesting mix of the things you want and the things that you don't want. There was a fair amount of pushback from the neighborhood. They're afraid that not affordable, not really, in the mid 600s per month. That they wouldn't be family, and that they would readily become Airbnb turnover kinds of places, that they have a regular sort of neighborhood, and that this would change the constitution of the neighborhood from family oriented. So, but they're eco-friendly and it's increasing density. And the other complaint was there wasn't sufficient parking allotted for this. And if you know this area, it dumps down into like Southwest Traffic Way. But short run, Councilman Fowler, I do not know the players. That might be a good thing or a bad thing on the council, but he basically said change happens and they all voted for it. So, but I think it puts an interesting question in front of us about all of these issues that we talk about. We need to make the city more dense. Is this really just gentrification? Is it supporting neighborhoods? So I just, of all the things, the hours that I listened to of various neighborhood things, this is the one that I thought was sort of prevalent for our committee. Anybody thought? Bob, do you know more about this?
No, I knew that it's underway. I don't know who's creating it. And, you know, I've been on design juries before that selected container housing as a great solution. It's so dependent on who's doing it and how they're doing it. And it can be brilliant, or it can be creating a new slum, everything in between. And unfortunately, typically when a proposal like this comes, the reaction is against the containers, and people don't really look at the underlying numbers and management. So that becomes the critical piece. But it's something we should look at and follow, and either be clear that we should be supporting it or not. I
Right.
strongly feel that.
I don't think there's a, exactly. I don't think there's a one or the other. It's situational. And of course the pictures they showed were stunning. Just,
Yeah.
you know, stunning, modern, wonderful. And it was also clear that a lot of the discussion had gone on before the meeting. There'd been a lot of lobbying by the developer. The neighborhood counter was not as organized, which seems sort of, but they were talking about management in that, would there be a covenant that says you couldn't flip these, they couldn't be Airbnbs. And I think they had a legitimate point with the parking. There's literally no parking, especially for the numbers of people they're talking about. And it could very easily become student housing, which is not what anybody wants. At least not there.
Except the students.
At that point, there's not a whole lot of access to mass transit either.
Oh yeah, nowhere near any of the bus lines or employment. It's a neighborhood, and it's not far from West Side housing. So I was hoping Gloria would be here because she might be able to weigh in on.
I'm sure she knows more about it than I do. That's for sure. And there is, you know, the city has been a little more appropriate recently with parking requirements, but normally it's when it is well served by public transportation, and that site's a little remote to count on that being the solution. So I don't know how they deal with that.
But
I'm not sure who they purchased their property from, but the two major landowners in that area are, or used to be anyway, Dean Machinery Company and Westside Housing.
Yeah, I think Westside Housing actually did not come out in favor of this, but they weren't there in person. I think they had submitted a letter. Yeah,
I think that's right. And the kids of Dean Machinery are divesting themselves of a lot of that property. So a lot of this is coming online now.
Well, my other thought is that by the time it comes to the committee, it's sort of a done deal. So how do we get out in front of this sort of thing if you're not in that business and have your ear to the ground, as Bob does?
Well, yeah, I mean, that kind of thing comes in the new master plan that's currently part of the community conversation. You have to define what you want, what you expect to see.
Right.
And right now, what we have is pretty obsolete, so people are making it up as they go, and it's useful if you have more clarity about what we hope to see in this city in the future.
The other there was a resolution that this committee support the blueprint for violence prevention, but then there was lots of discussion that was actually outside the purview of this particular committee.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I have on the update.
Does anybody else have anything they want to add? We haven't heard from our guests.
Hey, Billy's got his hand up.
Okay.
Billy?
I apologize. All that was actually from before, and I didn't lower my hand. Thank you for catching it. I appreciate the time.
Okay, I wanted to comment on the chat. Laura, I'm all for the goats. I absolutely am all for the goats.
Molly started it. I was just...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Molly,
I am all for the goats. I think they're a great solution.
There's some good articles out there.
Oh, yeah. And
I do think somebody could make a lot of money doing this.
Stencil Casey on the side.
Yeah, the next Environmental Achievement Award could be for the goats.
Love it.
Maybe I'll do that.
Good plan. Good plan. One of the things that we used to always do back in the old days when I was in planning school, we wanted to see what was going to happen in the city. We looked at an ownership map. And it was always kind of telling to see what the ownership pattern was in an area. You could kind of tell which way it was headed.
Yeah. Yep.
Anyway, and Bob, I think it's great that they're trying something new. Now they need to assess how it works out.
Right. Right. So the poor planning commission and people like that have to try to sort this out in advance without much in the way of guidelines. That's, my heart goes out to them.
Yeah, it's not easy. It's not easy. Well, we are at the end of our time. Do we have anybody else that wants anything entered into the record before we sign off? Our next big step is the awards, and I am excited about it. Really excited about it. Good to see you, Jerry. Okay, well, in that case, are we agreed to adjourn?
Yeah, good job. I didn't think we'd get through this agenda in this period of time.
Well, we have lots of help. Will everybody have a nice evening, and we have some more things to do between now and when we see each other again.
For sure.
All right.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Be safe.